Good evening and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate they've been asking for. Crime has become a deep-seated nightmare in our society. People are afraid to go to social events in the evenings or even in the day for that matter. Besides an obvious territorial war going on in New Providence, there seems to be an influx of other criminal activity. While Bahamians are perplexed by the ongoing horrific events, the police maintain it's safe to move around and crime statistics are down. In our episode tonight, we take a look at the politics of crime. We will examine how crime and criminal activity is affecting all of us. We dissect a university-led crime study and, of course, talk to the political parties about their possible solutions. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and we will be right back after this quick commercial break.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
You bring passion, and we bring world-class infrastructure and innovation that's designed to help your business grow. You have determination. We've got your back with a super-fast LTE network, giving you access to whatever you need, when you need it. You offer superior service, we put you in control. With a dedicated care team to look after your business 24/7. Together, we have the advantage. Alive. Let's do this.
For countless Bahamians, the nightmare of our crime is a daily occurrence. The dreaded late-night phone calls, the emotional, gut-wrenching scenes captured by the media, and the psychological strain of the aftermath. We begin our show with the almost surreal story of one family's ongoing tragedy. Here's Vonig Toot.
It's every parent's worst nightmare.
Top news tonight, a local high school student was stabbed and killed this afternoon. Reported
12th grader Adnai Wilson died in hospital on December 9, 2015, after being stabbed during a violent brawl with several knife-wielding students.
Two male students were involved in a fight in the area of Blanco Bleach on Prince Charles Drive, resulting in one being stabbed several times.
This disturbing video, widely circulated on social media, captures the final moments of the Doris Johnson student's short life. It was the second tragedy to hit the doorstep of Wilson's uncle, Gino Nairn.
Police are investigating a shooting at a popular fast food chain that has left a man in hospital.
His son, Javon, was left paralyzed following a shooting on the drive-through line of Wendy's Burnett Road branch on the night of June 15, 2012.
A man was in a vehicle with a woman on the drive-through line at Wendy's Village Road location around 9 last night when he was approached by a gunman who was on foot. The gunman demanded that the man get out of the vehicle, and he refused.
The state of crime in the country has left Bahamians gripped with fear. As another general election approaches, Bahamians look to their nation's leaders for a solution to this problem. In the meantime, the carnage continues.
Thank you, Vonig. When our discussion continues, the family dealing with the aftermath of those tragedies. Stay with us. On the Record continues right after this.
Need insurance for your valuables? Shield Insurance is the answer for you, offering friendly, professional service at competitive prices. Our experienced staff at Shield Insurance work hard to ensure that you get the right coverage for your car, home, or business. Now introducing our new premium financing program, designed to make it easier for government workers and employees of approved businesses to receive car and home insurance. Visit Shield Insurance on Thompson Boulevard or call 356-7202.
Welcome back. My guest is a man who lives with the realities of a violent act daily, and not just in his memory. In June of 2012, his son Javon was shot by a gunman. Gino Nairn, welcome to the show tonight. Gino, what was it like when you first got that dreaded call that night?
Jerome, I really couldn't believe it because my son never was involved in any type of shady deals or being around shady people. And it was a shock. I couldn't believe it until I actually got to the hospital and saw my son lying on the table, getting ready for surgery. It's 180% degree turn for my family, and we're still struggling with that. I think my wife is probably taking it better than I am, because I am mostly the caretaker for my son. I be with him in the morning, I prepare him for work, I bathe him, I do the bowel movement, I get him ready, help get him ready for work. And it isn't easy. As one gets older, it gets harder. Yet the young man who did this act is walking around free. And people tend to wonder, has justice really been done?
We'll certainly come back to that, but I want to talk about how this act really changed your son's life and your family's life.
It changed it in a way that now we have to, in terms of being careful where we go, what we say to people. We have to always be looking around while we're driving home, checking the rearview mirror, because you never know. There's always talk that people, if they didn't finish the deal, they'll come back and do it.
There's always fear of retaliation.
There's always fear. Mm-hmm. You know, we live in fear. You know, it's a constant thing, and I used to go out sometime, but now when I get home in the evening, after I pick him up, I'm home. So you want to find me, you can find me home.
The accused, as you mentioned, was accused of attempted murder. Want to talk about the outcome of his trial and really how that has left you, the feeling that has left, and what that has done to the family as well.
That has left, we've really been devastated with it, because all of the evidence that was presented during the trial led to this young man. And when we heard the verdict, I was just stunned. I didn't know what to do. I just sat down and started to cry, because we felt that the evidence was sufficient to put this young man off the street, and that he wouldn't harm anybody else. So we had to then start to regroup again as a family, because of that going the way that we felt it should not have gone. Even the judge, she was also surprised at the verdict. And it was also mentioned that one of the jury members told a family member that the young people on the jury didn't want blood on their hands, so they let the boy go. But blood is still on their hands, and I hope that none of this happened to any of their family members. You know, but it's a struggle every day, and we try to live with it and to cope with it the best we can. Jerome, on top of that, after June 15 of 2012, my daughter was robbed of her car in the driveway in 2014. In 2015, my nephew was murdered at Doris Johnson.
That's what I want to talk about. So let's move now from 2012, 2015. Adonai Wilson, he's attacked and stabbed by classmates who ultimately sentenced to time in prison. But again, this tragedy is at your family's doorstep.
Yes.
What must that have been like for you?
That too was a blow. For me, especially for my younger brother, because you know he worked at the prison center there, and he see these individuals come and go for murder and for rape and what have you. So he really felt it, and I felt it for him, because he's my baby brother. It also put us on notice again to be aware of our surroundings and where we go and where we hang out and who we talk to.
Our subject tonight is the politics of crime, and you'll hear people say that crime is not a political issue. But what do you feel when you hear the politicians and the people in charge talk about crime and what should be done or what's not being done? What kind of feelings does that engender in you as a Bahamian living with this every day?
As a Bahamian, you know, talk is cheap. Money buy land. and there's a bunch of talk, but nothing is being done. And you never feel it until it happens to you, you know. And the day we buried Adonai on December 23rd, my grandnephew was also shot. Nobody knows who did it, and we haven't heard anything from it since then.
Do you get a feeling of hopelessness?
There are times I feel there's you know, all sorts of things, Jerome, goes through my head. And if I was a man of violence, you know, a number of things I could have done, but I'm a God-fearing, and I leave these things in His hands.
Do you think the answer lies with the politicians, with government? Where do you think, if you had to make an assessment, where do you think the answer lies?
You know, we always hear when the police come on the record, on the radio and talk, oh, we know who these people are, we know where they are known to us. The problem is, if these people are known to you, why don't you just go and pick them up, lock them down? You know, ease the crime on the streets. You know, I don't wish what happened to my son happened to anybody else, but you have to live with it. And, you know, it's like playing dominoes or this or something. You were dealt with a hand, and you have to play the hand out. You know, but it isn't easy, Jerome, I tell you. And there are many nights I go to bed crying.
You know, I commend you for your continuing to look after your son, and we thank you for coming and sharing this story with us. I know it is heartbreaking and painful for you, and we wish you and your family all the best and continued prayers. And we thank you for sharing with us, and hopefully your story, like so many others, will get those who are in a position to do something to really move them into action. We thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On the other side of the break, we have contributors to the publication Violence in the Bahamas, Dr. Pandora Johnson and William Fielding, and still later representatives of the DNA, FNM, and PLP, who are all former law enforcement officers. Let's take a break and come back with more on the record.
So my modeling friends from out of town came to visit me this weekend, and they absolutely fell in love with the Bahamas. Before they left, I wanted to get them a gift, so I got them the 2016 Bahamas in Color calendar by Executive Printers. Each month has breathtaking photographs from around the Bahamas, easy to make Bahamian recipes, and short historical facts. Hashtag best gift ever. Get your calendar from Executive Printers today. It's never too early.
We are back. I'm joined in studio by Dr. Pandora Johnson and Mr. William Fielding. They are both contributors to the publication Violence in the Bahamas. Dr. Johnson is a professor at the University of the Bahamas, and as a part of the faculty group engaged in the research project focused on the Department of Corrections. Mr. Fielding is a grant writer. Welcome to On the Record. Thank you both for coming. I want to start by asking, why was it necessary to compile this report? What was the impetus for it? And let's start with that.
Well, this monograph comes from two events that we had at the college, one in 2011 and one in 2012, I think it was, based upon the research that the college, well, then college, has been undertaking for a number of years. And we brought that together. And then at that time, a group led by Jessica Minnis had done, in 2010, they had done a study down at the prison. And the second part was to look into more depth at some of the findings from that very informative study. So as to try and look at different aspects of crime and violence in the community. And then we put it together because, of course, we're always trying to get Bahamian content to inform the curriculum. And so this book now, or this monograph, is being used by faculty members in their classes, so that instead of having to use overseas material, we can now say that this is what happens within our community, and so people have got a better understanding as to what's happening.
What would you say were some of the more compelling findings in this report?
Well, I think that one of the more interesting chapters is one written by Michael Stevenson that I think challenges the perception that people undertake crime because they're poor. There's this idea of relative deprivation. So I aspire to a lifestyle that my education, that my job does not allow me to maintain or actually achieve. So I look for supplementary means by which I can achieve that lifestyle. And I think that that's an interesting attribute. I mean, in one of the interviews that he conducted, I think one of the inmates actually said, "I wanted it all." So that shows you the mindset of some of the people, that what they've got is not enough and they're prepared to do whatever it takes to enable them to achieve that goal.
Interesting finding. I think that's something that people talk about all the time, whether in group discussions or family discussions, the fact that we seem to be a society living beyond our means.
It has a question, you know, it has to do really with our values. And of course, you know, I was just in a class yesterday and was actually talking to the students about this drive for materialism and how that connects to criminal activity. You know, there was not too long ago, there was this almost a spike in people ripping gold chains. And of course, it's all related to my wanting more than what I have. You asked about compelling findings. Another one of the compelling findings, I think, has to do with violence in the school. And you know, we seem to think that one of the reasons why it was important to put police officers in the school had to do with maybe that would have been a way of containing violence. But what we found was, you know, on the contrary to that, the violence that happens in school against the person really happens between home and school. It really doesn't happen in school. The kind of crime that would be conducted against a child. You find that that area between home and school is where the person is most susceptible and most vulnerable.
We see that in the Adonai Wilson case. He was killed in a brawl on the way home from school. Yeah. And I mean, that speaks to one of my questions here. Do you think that babysitting, or for lack of a better term, police babysitting children helps?
Well, you see, as an educator, my own view is that it's not that the police can help with that situation in school, because it really has to do with what happens in the home. When children come to school, they don't come to school as empty vessels. They come to school and they bring certain values, they bring their experiences. And so there is a connection now between the behavior you see with the child in school. That behavior actually sometimes, of course, comes from the home. So there is violence in the home. And so what you find happening is then the behavior of the child is actually influenced by what happens in the home and what happens in the community.
And do we find then that violent child, or that activity that the child is seeing in the home, now becomes violent activity of the adult or the young adult?
Yes.
Well, yes. I mean, you can build a picture of, for example, where a child is exposed to violence in the home. That child then acts out, as they say, in the classroom. So they bring that violence from the home into the classroom with them. They then become troublesome in the classroom. They then get taken out of the class because they're troublesome. So that's going to interfere with their educational attainment. And if they are continually removed from class, it becomes to the student as if they have been expelled from class. And in this study that Jessica and her group did, a lot of the inmates claimed that they had been expelled from school. Of course, they hadn't been formally expelled from school, but that was the claim. And then once you're outside of the educational system, that has immense implications for your educational attainment and therefore for the type of job that you can get. And then, of course, you run the risk of looking to find a means of supporting yourself, which is illegal. So you can see this connection running all the way through, and particularly if the inmate has been abused. I mean, there's a chapter in there which clearly demonstrates that inmates typically are exposed to much more violence than a member of the general public. And so they're coming from homes initially, and then perhaps mixing with people along the way where violence is going to be more common, and therefore it becomes their sort of reality. This is the way they respond, because this is the way they've been, in a sense, taught to respond.
So what we are witnessing now is sort of the shaping of this cycle that begins early age at the home and continues throughout life. We are going to take a break. We're getting a lot closer to our segments with the three former law enforcement officers representing the three major parties. They're going to tell us what the parties have done or intend to do about crime coming up in the second half. But we're going to take a break and come back and have more of this discussion. Stay with us.
Every day, people suffer from some sort of joint pain.
To put on my socks, to bend over, to put on I used to have, it was really pain. I don't have it anymore.
If you've been living in pain and you're tired of trying products that just don't work, you are not alone. Today, 1.5 billion people worldwide are living in chronic pain. Don't let pain deny you the life you deserve. Join hundreds of thousands of Omega XL users that have chosen to fight inflammation and get rid of pain. Now they're living a pain-free life to the fullest thanks to Omega XL, the all-natural anti-inflammatory that has more available omega-3s than regular fish oil. Get more benefits in a powerful gel capsule that is smaller, easier to swallow, and more convenient. Switch to Omega XL and experience results you can feel. Put an end to your pain with Omega XL. Visit your local pharmacy or health food stores and get your Omega XL today.
Welcome back. We are talking about the politics of crime, but in this segment we are with the folks who are behind Violence in the Bahamas, a publication that really takes a look at this entire issue. Mr. Fielding, one of the subjects tackled in the publication is domestic violence. That is very prevalent within our society, within the crime statistics. We see it all the time. We hear the stories, see it on the news. I want to talk a little bit about that and the cycle of domestic violence as well, and how that permeates through the society.
Yes, well, I mean, we live in a culture where we rear children through discipline, which is typically physical discipline. So, and we may not like to think of physical discipline as being violence, but if I was to get up and hit you now, people would say that's a violent act. So we tend to explain or justify the violence because of its context. But if I hit you, and then we can discuss the context. And it's interesting how some people will justify that an act is or is not violent by its context, but the act, if I hit you, is always an act of violence. We can justify, we can talk about the context. But so we have a group, we typically discipline our children by physical punishment. Once we start hitting a child, of course, then you're on a slippery, slidey slope down to abusing the child. And of course, if we hit the child with an object, then we're running the risk that the child is immediately going to be at a far greater risk of being abused because we're using a device to hit the child. So so children are very often brought up in a violent environment from as early as they can remember. And so that is telling people that in order to correct behavior or to oblige you to behave in a way that I want you to behave, I use violence because that's the way I've been taught. And so you can start to see now in a situation, if I'm falling out with my domestic partner, how do I start to impose my will on this person who doesn't want to do what I want them to do.
And it's all, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
It's almost, I see it as almost accepted behavior sometimes, and from the very top. It's almost as if it's condoned behavior. If your wife or girlfriend steps out of hand, you put a hand on her.
We know, Jerome, that there are instances, which we found in the study as well, where partners would say, well, if my partner doesn't hit me, maybe he doesn't love me. And so this whole notion then is how we interpret, and I think that's the point Mr. Fielding was making. There is actually a kind of a cultural definition that we apply to violence, which may not be the kind of definition that we want to move towards. We talk about domestic violence and how it actually is condoned, your words, it's condoned actually almost as it were, it's condoned not only in the way you're thinking, but it's also condoned by the state, by the way we deal with punishment, even in our schools. For example, these days now, teachers are not allowed to administer corporal punishment. That doesn't mean that the school is not allowed to administer corporal punishment. But it can only be administered, really, it's supposed to be administered only by the principal or the person to whom the principal delegates that responsibility. But that, too, is a form of sanctioning violence, because what we find happening is that means it's accepted now to do that. In addition, we often think, too, that when we talk about domestic violence and the way you perhaps are describing it, it's as if the teachers are exempt from this. Teachers themselves are victims of domestic violence. And of course, when that happens to them at home, they bring it to the school as well. So what we're noticing here really is that this problem really, it's a major social problem.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
It's certainly spreads out.
Does the answer then, this is the final question as we wrap up, does the answer lie then at the feet of the politicians, government, those in authority?
I think it's clearly a very complex situation, and everybody has a part to play. I mean, the police, obviously, once the act has been... Ideally, we wouldn't want a police force because there would be no violence or crime done at all. So they're sort of like the cavalry who come in to clear up the mess. But everybody, I think we could contend, has a part to play in preventing the sad story from occurring. Because the gentleman you had on just before, I mean, it's really very distressing, the situation there. But clearly, I think what we need to do is to keep going back and saying what caused or what were the factors which precipitated the crime from occurring in the first place, and what can we do to try and prevent that from happening? And clearly, I think we could contend that we have to make sure that these people who drop out of school, the people who feel they've been expelled, those people, that doesn't happen to anybody, that there's got to be a mechanism by which we can keep these troublesome people engaged in the school system somehow or other. And there is a process if it's properly followed, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be happening. So everybody's got a part to play from the conception of the child onwards.
Straight up. Mr. Fielding, thank you very much. I do know that you all have a symposium coming up. You want to tell people about that very quickly?
Yes. The faculty have been engaged in another study through IDB-funded study, and we will be having a symposium on that on the 4th of October. It may seem a long way off, but these things take some time to plan.
Thank you very much. We want to thank you so much. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and certainly as we prepare for our candidates, they're going to have a lot to answer to, because some of the things that you talk about will obviously fall squarely at the feet of government and those in a position of authority and those in a position to make change. So thank you very much for joining us. You brought a wealth of knowledge to this discussion. We are at the halfway mark. We will be right back right after this quick break.
The Bahamas International Film Festival proudly presents Spring Break Beach Film Series. Join us every Wednesday and Saturday from now till April 1st at Junkanoo Beach to view Bahamian feature films. Tickets are only $10 online or $12 at the door. Call 698-1800 or online at bintlfilmfest.com or Facebook. Biff242. This week's featured films are The Wish, Artists of the Bahamas, and Fool's Gold.
Well, we are about to go into the second half to speak with candidates in the upcoming general elections who are all former police officers.
But when the Free National Movement cancelled the urban renewal program, all of the young men who were in the urban renewal ban in St. Cecilia, most of them have been killed, murdered.
So that took them out of the ban into the line of fire.
Again, yes, they put them in the line of fire.
But Mr. Bell, hold on, allow me. Remember, you heard it on the record. We'll be back right after this.
You bring passion, and we bring world-class infrastructure and innovation that's designed to help your business grow. You have determination. We've got your back with a super-fast LTE network, giving you access to whatever you need, when you need it. You offer superior service, we put you in control. With a dedicated care team to look after your business 24/7. Together, we have the advantage. Alive. Let's do this.
Watching on the record, welcome back. Crime and violence is our topic today, and our guests in the second half are no strangers to that subject. The Honorable Keith Bell is the Minister of State for National Security. He's a former Assistant Commissioner of Police who studied law and became an attorney. Welcome to the show, sir.
Pleasure to be here.
Also, Stephen Greenslade is another former law enforcement officer. He has a long tenure in the field of security. He's the owner of ICS, Bahamas Company Limited, and is the Democratic National Alliance candidate for Golden Isles. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And the Free National Movement's candidate for Mount Moriah, Marvin Dames, joins the other panelists as a former assistant commissioner. Dames was also touted within the community to be the next commissioner of police, but instead he opted out and became the director of security at Bahamar. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I made a joke earlier that this must be the safest place in the country tonight. Well, let's talk about sort of this issue of crime, and I call it the politics of crime, because it really becomes a political football in this season. Mr. Dames, I'm going to begin with you. You're looking to become a member of parliament in an area that holds one of the biggest hotspots, for criminal activity, one of the hotspots, the Yellow Elder area, I think is within your area, right? Should you emerge as winner of that seat in the upcoming general elections, what are your plans in ridding that community? I just want to talk about let's talk specifically in that area. What do you plan to do in that context?
Well, thank you so much, Jerome, for having me here this evening. You're absolutely correct. I've been walking the constituency of Mount Moriah now for the last 12 weeks. And just last week, had an opportunity to go into the Yellow Elder East area. And that's one of those new communities that would have been added to Mount Moriah, and was having a conversation with a young man on the streets. And he said, Mr. Dames, since 2014, I lost about 22 of my friends.
Wow.
In that small area of Yellow Elder. So it is a problem. But it's not only a problem that's isolated to Yellow Elder, as we are fully aware. There are any number of communities throughout New Providence that are affected the same way. But your question is, what do we plan to do in Yellow Elder? Well, our plan is kind of connected to our national platform as a party. One of the things that we intend to do, certainly, is to bring a holistic scope to Yellow Elder. What do I mean by that? We know that enforcement is extremely important, and we will continue to use enforcement, but we intend to balance our approach to crime fighting in the area. So we will use a combination of enforcement, but we'll also use a combination of social programs, that will bring families together, that will keep kids occupied, and that those programs will be a combination of programs geared towards keeping young people on the right path. Everything from education to socialization to sporting programs. Many of these communities lack just that.
I'm going to give your other colleagues here an opportunity at the same question for your respective areas.
Yes, Jerome, the dynamics of crime or criminality in Golden Isles is somewhat different from other areas. You wouldn't find much hot spots in that area. There's one particular zone that we are aware of now since Dignity was added in there. But by and large, we have the same views as many other teams or parties the other parties may have in terms of the socialization, the family unit, community mindedness, and activity that takes the youth away from criminal behavior to more structured behavior and more contributory behavior in the society. And one of the most fundamental aspects of my plan would be the mentorship program that I plan to roll out to demonstrate to the young men especially the importance of contributing to society as opposed to being a burden to society through criminality.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jerome. I believe that, and again, the PLP certainly is of the view that any crime strategy must embrace prevention, detection, prosecution, and certainly rehabilitation. In the Carmichael area, again, we've had our challenges. And, in some areas, as Mr. Dames indicated, in the Yellow Elder, for instance, there are young men that cannot go in certain parts of Carmichael, in as much young men in certain parts of Yellow Elder can go in certain areas of Yellow Elder. And so in response to that, under the first the Christie administration, we had implemented a number of initiatives, particularly the urban renewal, the school-based policing. We had looked at all of these programs, and I thought that they were having great success. However, under the former F&M administration, they canceled these programs. And so what we have had to do, having come to office from 2012, is to re-energize, rebuild those programs from ground zero level up. And so going into, just speaking about Yellow Elder, for instance, we've had to go back in there through our saturation patrols, through our urban renewal. We've had to rebuild those communities, get in the households, get in the minds of these young men, and try and turn them around.
First of all, I do apologize for not indicating your candidacy in Carmichael. I do apologize for that. But having heard, and we're going to continue now, having heard what you said the PLP has done in this administration, despite these things, we see this continued escalation. People are still in fear of their lives. People are still living in fear of crime.
Yes.
Can you honestly say that you think these things are working?
Well, Jerome, I think that for us, we have to accept the fact that there's no question that there's simply too much violence. There's too much homicides, there are too much shootings that's going on in this country. And I think for us, we have to continue to look at the bigger picture. Most of the violence that is being perpetrated by these individuals in our society are being done by firearms. The Bahamas does not produce guns. So how are the guns getting in through our borders? We have porous borders. How are we working with our international agencies and countries around us? How are we working with them to stop the drugs from coming? How are we dealing with being a multinational or a major transshipment point for drugs? All of these things are issues and complex matters that we're dealing with as a government. As for us, we have given all of our law enforcement agencies the necessary tools that they require to fight the challenges that face us. One of the major challenges right now that has emerged is this issue of gang violence in these areas. And so again, we have passed very recently in 2014 the gang legislation. We have made amendments to the Evidence Act, which allows for the notarization of statements. So if someone dies, a witness dies, that statement can still be read into evidence. We have amended the Evidence Act to allow for video conferencing. So we have done a whole lot in terms of ensuring that we are able to, first of all, stop the violence through prevention where it actually occurs, bring in perpetrators to swift justice.
Well, if I may add, and You know, I'm not discounting that Mr. Bell is saying that those things were done, but to your point too, we're not yielding the effects that we ought to be yielding. And when you go into these communities, you see exactly that. We have a problem.
So then, what then would be a F&M government solution?
Well, he's absolutely correct in what he said at the beginning, and we continue to tout this. You know, an F&M government will take a multidisciplinary, a multi-faceted approach to addressing the problem of crime. We have to look at, is correct, prevention and deterrence, right? We have to look at apprehension. You have to look at prosecutions. You have to look at sentencing and rehabilitation and reintegration. You know, we're not going to solve this problem, and this is why I continue to say that our approach is flawed. The approach to crime fighting over the last few years have been flawed, all right? What do I mean by that? There is a heavy dose of enforcement, and that is necessary because we have no other choice. Young men, like Mr. Bell is saying, they're dying on the streets. So we have to bring some form of remedy to kind of put a Band-Aid on that violence. So from a short-term perspective, that is what we're doing. But we need programs that are long-term, that we can follow, that's evidence-based. You know, when we talk about urban renewal may be doing some good things. They have a pretty good band that's out there. But we need the evidence that will tell us that urban renewal is serving the purpose that it was set out to serve.
Mr. James, to put a plug right there, we've got to take a break. I know you're going to get into a discussion. We're going to take a break and come back. I'll allow you to answer once we come out of the break. Stay with us on the record. We'll continue right after this.
What are you doing?
Calling the bank to order more checks.
Go to epbahamas.com and order your checks from Executive Printers.
Executive Printers. We're the authority in business and personal check printing in the Bahamas. Come in and see one of our specialists or visit us online at epbahamas.com to design and order your checks today.
You're watching On the Record. We are in the second segment of our show tonight. We are discussing the politics of crime. Marvin Dames, the F&M's candidate for Mount Moriah. Keith Bell, Minister of State for National Security, also seeking the candidacy, or has the candidacy for Carmichael, and the DNA candidate for Golden Isles, Mrs. Stephen Greenslade. Sir, as we went to the break, we were sort of talking about, on a broader sense, what is happening and what could be happening. What's the DNA's plan should you become government?
Well, first of all, we want to enhance the strategies that we use now on the ground in our policing initiatives. One of those things include saturation patrols, especially in hotspots, in areas known for crime activity or high crime. What that does is it creates a presence in the community, and as we all know, the barrier between criminality and the perpetrator is the police. Meaning the limits of crime is the police. So police presence is important consistently in areas where we consider hotspots. And then we have to look at the level of political influence in the administration of the police force, and the agency is connected with crime prevention and detection. I think that has a lot to do with the reasons for the lack or the limited results we see in our control of crime, political interference, where, for example, a person may be arrested, and for some reason or the other, is given bail or release in a manner that circumvents the system. So we believe that in the Bahamas, there's a great influence involved in our crime control mechanism, and it comes from the political aspect, and we want to bring resolve to that.
You all have both come from in the belly of the force. You've all come up. You would have heard Mr. Nairn's story tonight. His is the story of thousands of other Bahamians. Sitting here listening to you all, as a Bahamian, I don't get a sense that, oh, I don't see a finish line. I don't see a lot of hope. I hear we can do this, we've tried this, this should happen. But the reality is, on any given day, evening, whenever, a gun could be put to my head at any point, my home could be violated, anything could happen. And there is a fear of crime. There is a graphic sitting behind me of a man who went to court this week charged with 3 murders. When I saw it, I thought, he must be a serial killer. How does one man stand up for 3? How are we going in the immediate future to get a handle on this situation? And I hear you all have laid out these very nicely crafted policies, but for the people who are listening and watching, this has flown right over their head. It means nothing to them because they are still living with this every day.
Well, the point, is...
Yeah,
everyone answer.
The point is...
Listen, what we're faced with is this, and I continue to say this day in and day out. When you have a flawed model, you can put all of the resources you have at your disposal, right? The end results will be flawed, okay? It's as simple as that.
So the problem is the model.
The model is flawed. So one of the things that we're faced with is this. So we talk about resources. We talk about doing this, doing that, doing this, all right? Here is the key thing. What is the establishment of the Royal Bahamas Police Force? What should the establishment of a force be? Because we have yet to come to grips with what the establishment of a police force should be in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So what do I mean? What should be the makeup of a station in a community, and why? All right? How many assistant commissioners, how many superintendents, how many constables, how many sergeants? Because until you determine what your establishment is and why you're reaching those numbers, the reason for those numbers, you will continue to be shooting in the dark. Why? Because you will be stretching your force beyond its limits.
So the fix is the force.
But I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that because the reality is that, and again, I can say that crime is going down. The people don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Because you're still having the homicides and shootings. How do you stop that? The reality is, Jerome, is that the police has put all of these individuals who are causing this, the individual you're talking about, they've put all of them before the courts. All of them have pending cases. And whenever a person is charged with a serious offense, an indictable offense, they must be tried by the Supreme Court. If we are going to talk about dealing with the homicides and the murders, which is the barometer which will determine any of our success, we have to determine now how we're going to fix the system, this flawed system that you're talking about. So what it is we have to do, we have when we came to office, we had over 800 serious cases before the Supreme Court. It seems to me that each year, one year we had 150 murders, next year we had 100 and something. It means to me that we have to determine what cases we want to be tried before the Supreme Court. Why are we trying some cases before the Supreme Court? So
you say now the problem is the justice system.
No, let's move on. Or we then ought to say, let's move armed robberies, some sexual offenses, burglary, from making them strictly indictable or serious offenses, and let it be tried by the magistrate. Perhaps if we do that, then it means that the homicide cases that we are trying to get before the judges and be tried in a reasonable time can be tried. But these guys are being released. They're being released on bail. They're being released on bail because they cannot be tried in a reasonable time.
Okay,
that is what
you have your time, Mr. Greenslade. Go ahead.
You can do that. You're looking at arbitrarily shifting the way our justice system work and operate. You can't do that, right? And
so what's the
solution? I don't agree with you holistically, Marvin, that the system is flawed to the extent that you're expressing. I think the management of the system could be desired. The management of the system could be desired, and the implementation and deployment of the resources could be strategically done to affect the reduction of crime that we seek to achieve.
You see,
all right. To Keith's point, I think our judicial system is adequately structured. It's adequately structured. If we move cases through the system in a timely manner, we'll see the results we seek to have.
But here it is.
The structure.
Here it is. Each of you are outlining complaints about the system, right? Now, Mr. Bell has outlined it, but Mr. Bell is a part of the PLP administration. We're on the heels of another general election. So we're beyond excuses now. We're about what Mr. Bell ought to be saying is why haven't we fixed those issues?
Yeah,
let me finish. To the problem. We continue to run away from this. We need to reach a place in this country where things are driven by evidence, not emotions, okay? And you will not, when we talk about the Royal Bahamas Police Force, we talk about the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, we talk about the prison, we talk about Customs and Immigration. We need now to establish what should the establishment of these leading organizations be? Because we're demanding that we want them to do this, we want them to do that, we want them to do this. But remember now, there are only a few bodies to go around. And we're policing an archipelago.
Okay.
If our programs are going to be effective, if they're going to be effective, we must make certain that we have the adequate resources to execute those programs.
The bottleneck still remains at the courts. The police, and while Marvin served as the chief superintendent in charge of CID, I served as the director of intelligence. Mr. Deems know that the number of matters that the police put before the courts simply cannot try them. And I'm looking specifically at the homicides and the shooting incidents. If we are going to fix or stop the hemorrhage, it seems to me that we need to ensure that the cases that we put before the court are properly investigated, they are properly prosecuted, they are properly calendared, and those cases come on. When we came to office in 2012, the conviction rate stood at a mere 31%. We have gotten the conviction rate in the Supreme Court to date. It stands at 66%, and it's climbing. In 1 year, we've been able to try 33 murder cases. That's the first time that happened in our history.
I do want to just stick a pin here. You would have heard earlier in the conversation where they said that a part of the problem we have is that the criminal activity begins with the young people, and then when they go to prison, as a part of that conviction rate, the cycle continues. And while I hear this discussion on the level of the police need to do this needs to happen in the court, there is a wider issue that still exists out in the society.
Well, we talk about taking a multidisciplinary approach, and what maybe the PLP ought to have considered is how can we use arbitration, how can we use mediation, and how can we remedy this through the communities. And this is where local governments
You're lumping all of the different variables together. Right? Arbitration, you're looking at dealing with more civil matters and dispute matters through that process. And we could use more arbitration hearings in our society to move cases through the system and reduce the log. All right, and we talk about the courts and the slow pace of cases moving through the courts. There's a broader issue involved there, in my opinion. You go to court, you find attorneys getting adjournment. You have attorneys who manipulate the system to slow the pace down of their cases for whatever reason. You have set court sessions that starts late in the day, 12 o'clock court just commencing. And breaking earlier than desired. So the system in my mind, the structure in my mind is adequate. The management of the system is where we have our issues, and that's by and large. And so if we focus on management and productivity, we can reduce some of the
Gentlemen, we have to take a quick break. We're going to continue this discussion. Thank you very much. We've got to take a break. We're back right after this. Stay with us.
You bring passion, and we bring world-class infrastructure and innovation that's designed to help your business grow. You have determination. We've got your back with a super-fast LTE network, giving you access to whatever you need, when you need it. You offer superior service, we put you in control. With a dedicated care team to look after your business 24/7. Together, we have the advantage. Alive, let's do this.
Welcome back to On the Record. We are talking tonight about the politics of crime. Mr. Greenslade, your company was awarded the contract for the monitoring through the ankle bracelet. Become quite an issue. Quite a bit of murder victims and perpetrators wearing those bracelets. How effective, or it's been a lot of concern about the effectiveness of this system.
The system was very effective when my company managed it or provided the service to the government. We had a 90+% rate of compliance. And in the electronic monitoring industry, the measurement of compliance determines whether the system is effective or it has improvements to go to be effective. I have high confidence in the electronic monitoring system.
So what's the issue with it? A lot of people have criticized it, and gentlemen put it out there. The PLP would have criticized it when the FNM was bringing it in. The FNM has had something to say about it as well. That's what I'm throwing out there. But a lot of murder victims and perpetrators are wearing these ankle bracelets. I'm like everyone else. I'm asking, what is the point?
I'm wondering. I was in the Royal Bahamas Police Force at the time. Wasn't a part of the acquisition of this system or the introduction. But we cannot look at ankle bracelets as a panacea to solving our crime problem.
Should we continue with it?
And in many states, and this is where we go wrong, in many states where these things are applied, not applied for these hardcore offenders, because I'm gonna give you a case in point. You can be a hardcore offender, you've been put on bail, you have an ankle bracelet. What could you do? You will go sit on your porch with your ankle bracelets on, take your telephone, hey Joe, there's a guy around the corner I want you to deal with. Is the ankle bracelet serving that purpose of preventing that from happening?
It's continuing.
We continue in this country, and this is where we continue to go wrong. We go to sleep, we wake up, we have this grand idea as to what we need, and then we introduce.
I'm going to
the ankle bracelet was introduced by the free national government.
But if it is not effective,
it was very
Mr. Green said I can allow you to speak. Hold on one second.
Not totally, but the way it's being applied, it's wrong.
Okay.
And it should not be.
You know, we have, as a service provider, we made many recommendations on how the program should be administered and how it should be used, including avoiding putting serious offenders on the program.
So you made the recommendations, but they weren't carried through?
No.
Okay.
They weren't carried through. They weren't carried through. And instead of enhancing the uses of the program, the administration decided to shift service provider, which was a very unwise thing to do.
Mr. Bell, you have had 4.5 years to fix it.
In 2006, I served as the director of the Research and Planning Unit, and the idea of this anklet bracelet came up. I did the necessary research, and I told the government at the time that, look here, it cannot be, you have to be very cautious what you do, what you acquire, and how you introduce it. In 2007, the Progressive Liberal Party lost the government, and the FNM became the government. They introduced the system, and in introducing the system, I'm not sure if there was full education and awareness in terms of what was the purpose and objective of the anklet bracelet. Hence, persons were being released on bail, charged with murder, and they were being released on the anklet bracelet system. I would submit that ICS did a fantastic job in terms of monitoring persons who were released on bail for murder with the anklet bracelet. Because we have had instances, many instances, so I disagree with Mr. Dean.
So why did they lose the
we have instances, well, that's something I won't discuss at this level. But the point is that we have had cases that are now before our Supreme Court where we've been able to use the anklet bracelet and put these suspects back on the scenes
But
of
it
mob
does
murders.
beg the question, if they were doing a good job and it was working, if it ain't broke, why fix it?
Why did they lose the contract?
The contract came to an
What
end.
has changed?
The contract came to an end, and the government made a decision. That was it.
Hold on.
That was
What
it.
has changed? What has changed
That was
now
it.
that you said that when you were in the police force, now that you're a part of government,
Yes.
it's 2017.
Yes.
You've been in government for 5 years.
Yes.
What has changed between that period and now?
You talk about as it relates to the anklet bracelet?
As it relates to ankle bracelet. And why did it serve you as the government to change the ankle? If you were so pleased with the performance of this ISC.
Yes.
So why
The contract came to an end, and the government made a decision to change vendors.
Well,
The fact of the matter is that when you look at any whether it's anklet bracelet, whether it's CCTV, whether it's the monitoring of our streets and in relation to drones, we have been changing vendors. The government has the right to do it.
And that's one of the issues.
I hope
that's one of the issues.
An F&M government will make it transparent.
Yeah,
I think it needs to be transparent. So why?
What was the reason given to you for the removal of the contract?
What Senator Bell just expressed is one of the fundamental issues in this country, where governments come into office or administrations come into office, and without thought of the effect that their decision have on society or the citizens, they make changes to programs that are working properly and implement new systems that they have to start again from scratch to implement, and the issue overcomes us as a
Gentlemen,
society.
I'm going to pause you for just 1 second. Go ahead, you finish, and then I'll say what I have to say.
So the ankle bracelet program was working. It was working perfectly. The device was the best device on the market. The systems and software that ICS employed, along with our partners, are the best on the market. And a switch was made because of political
Which
views.
brings me to my
influence.
to my question, which is really the basis for this show. Are we playing politics with crime?
Of course we are.
I'll start with you.
Of course we are. We're playing politics with crime. We play politics with just about everything we do in this country.
But is that not a dangerous thing given the magnitude of this problem?
It's a very dangerous thing because it has far-reaching consequences and effects on the community that we serve.
Well, this
the communities that we serve.
I mean, it's a good marketing plug for ICS. But here's where we sit. This is why it's so important for us to enact this Freedom of Information Act, to see why we come to the decisions we arrived at.
But Mr. Dames, you don't think the FNM is guilty of the same thing?
Well, maybe,
when they were in
maybe back
office?
then. Maybe back then. But this new FNM will not take that path. This new
So you're
FNM
assuring
will
the
not
public
take-
that an
I
FNM
will
government
assure
will not?
Absolutely. 110%.
Mr. Bell,
those part of the DNA and the FNM may say that they are playing politics with crime. But you listen to Mr. Nairn just now, and you listen to his crime, his hurt.
How could we
his
play
son
politics with crime?
The PLP isn't playing politics with no crime. We are serious about fighting crime. What I believe, Mr. Jerome and Stephen and Marvin, what is very important here, I believe, is that we have to accept the fact that government is continuous. It cannot be where if a government comes in, they stop, review, cancel. As the government of the FNM party is making this claim as relates to Bahamas.
The PLP is not guilty of that?
As
Where you had 5 years,
so the fact is then that if you when we looked at what happened when the FNM stopped, reviewed, and canceled all of the programs, he talked about at the beginning of this program, he talked about urban renewal and the evidence-based. The fact of the matter is, yes, we have a band, and there are over 1,000 young persons in that band, many of whom never played a musical instrument.
Yeah.
But when the Free National Movement canceled the urban renewal program, all of the young men who were in the urban renewal band in St. Cecilia, most of them have been killed, murdered.
So that took them out of the band into the line of fire.
Yes, they put them in the line of fire.
But Mr. Bell,
Hold on, allow Mr. Greenslade.
That's a serious. That's a serious.
We'll come back. We'll come back. Give us 1 second.
Let's go back to a very serious point.
I must respond to that.
Yeah.
Very serious point. All right, and Marvin, you said that this new FNM, we saw that stigma placed on parties before, the new PLP, okay? and we saw the same old methodologies and philosophy and all that ideologies coming into play, right? Then you talk about government stopping, reviewing, and canceling programs that benefits the society. But your government did the same thing. Your government did the same thing with a very critical program in that monitoring program, which had a national security attachment. High level of sensitivity. And the shift, I will opine, the shift had a lot to do with the sudden rise in crime between October and February
there is
of
I would submit there is
October
a significant difference between shift and stop.
Okay, right?
Mr.
Shift.
You
made a very, very serious statement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with no evidence, and this is the problem with your government. You have that because these men were no longer in a band, they lost their lives. And you blame urban renewal. You blame it on the FNL. That's a serious indictment. And you're absolutely wrong because you do not have any facts. You are a government that never introduced evidence to back up anything. You introduced urban. Hold on. You introduced. You always.
Yes, I have a list of the individuals who are being
executed. But you are making.
Executed.
Yeah, but you.
These are young,
because they're executed because they're no longer in a band.
We can't talk at the same time.
Let me finish my
We can't talk. We can't all talk at the same time. 1 second.
They're executed because they're no longer in a band. They're executed because many of your programs have failed. And they have failed significantly. You have no evidence to back up any assertions that you're making. You talk about a band. We're spending millions of dollars to groom people to be in a band. The schools are doing a much better job. Government High has an excellent band. Many of these government schools have an excellent band. We do not need urban renewal to make band members out of kids. The schools can do that. The schools can do that. All urban renewal.
Are you saying that the academy is going to cancel urban renewal?
No, I'm not saying that. But all urban renewal has been fraught with over the last 5 years is scandal after scandal after scandal.
Maybe that's another discussion.
No, the point is this: when the government introduced urban renewal, the idea was to bring the services of the government back into the community to deal with all of these social issues and ills. We accept that if you go in Beantown, there is this thing where when the young men reach grade 9, they don't go. Most of them don't go beyond that high school, and so you find, and then of course you found that a lot of students were being suspended or expelled, and they were not being suspended or expelled into some wholesome program.
So now they're functionally illiterate.
They were functionally illiterate,
into the
and
society,
so urban renewal was there to fill that void. When we started urban renewal, there were a number of initiatives and programs we started. One of the programs that we started in the urban renewal was this urban renewal band. And I tell you, Jerome, when we started that in Farm Road, here it is. We took a number of young people who never played musical instruments before, and the police band started teaching them the musical instruments, and these children caught on.
And it also paired them with police.
Exactly, and they became positive, and they began to be reproductive.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to go to break.
When they stopped it,
I'll give you the last few comments. I'll give you the last few comments. So I will give you the last few comments.
Where's the evidence?
Gentlemen, there will be more times.
The police force.
I assure you, we'll come on to discuss urban renewal.
Where is the evidence?
Gentlemen, you all are former officers. I expect you to follow the rules.
Where's the evidence?
You were there.
Mr. Greenslade, I give you the final few words.
Listen, we have won international prizes.
Mr. Bell, Mr. Dames.
Forget about the prizes.
Thank you. Thank
you. One of the reasons I got involved in frontline politics to help bring a fresh air to political culture in this country.
So you said it's a lot of hot air.
a breath of fresh air to the political process in this country. A DNA government will continue programs that work and tweak programs that don't work or dismiss programs that don't work. But we need to save our country. We need to prepare it for the future. generations to come behind us, and we need to remove politics from everything we do in this country.
I think on that note, sir, we are going to end tonight. So thank you very much. I think that's a good note to end on. Gentlemen, thank you very much for a lively debate. I appreciate you coming and talking with us tonight. We hope to see you back here very soon. I think we got a couple more topics we need to discuss.
We're all friends.
Yeah, I agree. Stay with us. We're going to wrap up the show right after the screen break.
For news that's happening in our country, the best place to turn is Our News.
Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight.
The biggest stories on the best station.
Helping news tonight. The government collected almost.
The Education Minister. The Bahamas Claims Committee explains how unsecured.
Giving you all sides of the equation to keep you informed.
Well, in other news, police are cracking down on
the claims of Bahamas creditors and former.
Police are on the scene here at a popular hangout.
Statement yesterday, Catholic Archbishop.
Watch Our News weeknights 7:30 and weekends at 7 p.m. only on RTV.
And wow, what a show. Welcome back to On the Record, a new, fresh show tempting the hot political climate here in the Bahamas just ahead of our general elections. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed our show tonight. A very special thanks to our guests Gino Nairn, William Fielding, Dr. Pandora Johnson, Marvin Dames, Keith Bell, and Stephen Greenslade. Of course, my producer, the entire technical staff, and of course you, the audience who are watching. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. Look for On the Record. We're on Twitter as well, on Instagram. Look for Jerome Sawyer On the Record. Give us your feedback, and of course, look out for chances to get in on the discussion. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the current state of politics of the country on the road to general elections. Once again, I'm Jerome Sawyer, your host. We'll see you next time on The Record.